Some ministry practitioners are truly great at recognizing the potential in others and then helping those people realize their potential. So, what are the elements that help somebody be good at this practice? Well, Reverend Mark Boyce, who is in placement at the Murray Rivers Regional Team, has reflected upon this and he shares his insights for us. You have discovered a gift that you didn't realize you really had, and you thought everybody else has this gift. And I said, no, that's not the case. So did you want to just describe what it is that you've noticed that you are pretty good at? I know that you want to be humble and say, yeah, I'm not that good, but you are. So do you want to just say what your unique ability is and what it is you've discovered as you've reflected on this?
The thing I've discovered, and I guess after working in mental health services for over 25 years, what I've discovered is that in a system that doesn't see the potential in people and often classes them around an illness-based model, I tend to see people from their potential and what it is they're able to do and be and give and transform into. So for me, I've realized that I do have this gift to see the potential in people. And I've tried my best over the years to be able to help them to see that potential so that they can actually then take it on themselves and live in that and be in that. So again, I think that's probably the gift that I would bring in many situations.
And one of the things you've recognised in the conversations we've been having in terms of discovering your unique abilities and so forth is you've discovered that not everybody recognises this and not everybody kind of operates in the same way that you do.
See, I still find that strange. I don't see.
But, the thing about it is that not everybody kind of helps other people realise their potential.
Right. Okay. See, I thought that was normal given our Christian heritage and background, is that we are called to be a transformational people. And for me, the gospel is primarily about transformation. Yes. And about helping people to live to their full potential and to live life to the full. So for me, that seems very normal.
Yes. So during one of our sessions, we talked about, you discovered how not everybody else operates and you were surprised that not everybody else operates. So the question that we posed was, what is it that you do to actually help people realize their potential? And then you came up with these 9 or 10 things that are specific to the way that informs your practice.
Yeah.
So the first one, and we're just going to go through them one by one. The first one is that you've realized that God loves you and that you are valued. So do you want to say something about that?
Oh, yes. So years ago, I was reading Genesis. Don't know why I was reading Genesis. And I came to that part where it said, God saw all that he had made and it was very good. And I suddenly realized that I am very good. That what God created was very good in me. And so for me, I guess I saw the potential in me that God saw in me from a long time ago. But it also made me realize that because God saw me, that I was valuable, that I belonged, that I was accepted, all those things, and that there was goodness in me that could blossom and grow and develop and do all those things. And so for me, there was this realization that I am accepted. And so for me, that was pretty powerful, I have to say. That was really transformational in my life.
Yes.
To realize that I am accepted and valued and that I belong in the sight of God. So for me, it just changed my life and made me live my life very differently.
So that transformation that you experienced was obviously significant, and then you felt the call of ministry and went into ministry and those sorts of things. So the second point is that you're suggesting as an expression of this, you're also realizing that God loves others.
Oh, yes. And God sees everyone in the same light. So it's not just for me, but it's for everyone else. God sees everyone else in that light, that they are very good. And again, that there's very good stuff in people that is transformational, life-giving, fulfilling, all those things. And so for me, it makes me look at people quite differently and work with people quite differently.
Yes, yes. It's interesting that you're using the word seeing, like being
Yes.
seen, because I think within our kind of disconnected society, and people are quite often living lives, quite isolated. We hear all the time that 25% of people are experiencing loneliness at any one time, which is a massive percentage of the population because of the way that we kind of order our lives within society. There's lots of people who don't feel as though they're seen. So, it's interesting that you're using that word specifically, seen, and being
Yes.
seen by God. So then the next thing, as a kind of continuation out of that, is you're suggesting that what you do in your practice in helping others realize their potential is believing everybody is doing their best.
Oh, yes. And I think everyone, wherever they are, is doing the best they can with what they know at the time. And I truly believe that people are trying to do the best they can with what they know. And sometimes that works for them, and sometimes that doesn't quite work for them. But I ultimately believe people are trying to do the best they can. And in doing the best they can, they're actually, again, signaling that there is something good in them and that God believes in them, and they can believe in God and they can believe in others too, because they're doing the best they can with what they know. And so, again, that makes me look at people in a different way. So instead of making judgments or condemnations or putting them in a box or doing those kinds of things, I'm actually just saying they're doing the best they can with what they know. And I'm not going to make judgments around that. I'm not going to make criticisms around that. I'm simply saying they're doing the best they can with what they know. And that puts me in a different position again, in a different way of being able to, again, use that with language, be able to see people and get to know them. So again, for me, that's really important.
Yes. And then the other trait you've reflected upon and written down, which I think is a great process, because you don't write this stuff down, right? It just flies off into the ether, but it needs to be captured. And part of the reason that it's so great that you've done this and captured this is also because other people can learn from your experience. You can teach this if it's kind of captured.
Yeah.
And then the next step within this progression that you're building now is that believing people need others to be their best.
Oh, yes. I don't think we actually have within us all that we need to become all that we can be. I don't think that's possible. And again, I'm a great fan of Hugh Mackay and those kinds of people who actually say, if we want to grow and develop, then we need others in our lives. We need other people to help us to see what we can't see and believe in us when we can't believe in ourselves, and to sometimes help us and challenge us and also help us to grow and develop and also to see the potential. So I actually think we need other people. And I read a lot of the self-help books and I think, nah, they don't know what they're talking about. Sorry, I'm being really rude there, I guess.
No, you're not. But I think you do need to kind of explain what you mean by that in terms of, so what is it about the self-help books that you
the
don't?
self-help books give me a problem because they kind of tinker with what's going on here, but when you can't see it or you don't know it or you don't understand it or you can't get it because there's stuff in the way, you need others to help you do that. And so sometimes, tinkering within is not helpful. We need others that help us to see the best, just like God saw the best in me. And I woke up and realized that. I don't think I'd be around today if it wasn't for that. That's how I see it. And from my other experience of having other people in my life who have actually seen the best in me, that's been transformational for me. So I realize I can't do it by myself. I need others to help me do it. And I know that others need others to help them to be able to grow and develop.
So within this, that's a pretty big, you're advocating very strongly for community and the need for community.
Oh, yes. I don't think we get by without community. And again, my mental health work, I would see people who flourish, and they flourish because they've got others in their lives. And I would see other people who don't flourish because they don't have that in their lives. And so I've seen the contrast of what happens. And I've seen what happens when people do have people in their lives, and they get that potential to grow, to be transformed, to work their way through what's going on. So for me, it's a no-brainer.
And the thing about it is that because of your experience for such a long time in the mental health field, you bring a unique set of experiences to the practice of ministry.
Oh.
And that's a gift. That really is a gift that we can learn from. So the next step within kind of this framework that you put together, believing that everybody has further potential.
So again, I'm just going back to my mental health stuff. In mental health, we would use the recovery model. And the recovery model says something bad has happened, but doesn't mean you can't live your life and live your life to the full, knowing there may be some issues that have happened that, may cause some issues for you. But overall, the potential is there for you to live life. And so I actually think that for me, part of my role and part of my ministry is to help people to see the potential, to cheer them on, if you like, and to say, actually, I can see you doing this, and isn't that fantastic? And often when, people sometimes balk at that, but when people get it and they start living in that, that's fantastic. You can't beat that.
So when you say that people balk at it, as in they kind of are a little bit dismissive. Oh, no, you're not seeing me right because I've got all this baggage. Is that the sort of thing you mean?
Or because I've got this illness, or because, I'm no good, or, I've never been any good, all that kind of stuff that goes on. But once people start to get the idea that you see something different in them, it actually helps people to start to think differently and to be different.
Understanding the importance of creating safe spaces.
Oh, yes. This is a biggie for me. I don't think people can transform or change unless they are in safe spaces. And a lot of my role that I had within chaplaincy, within mental health, was creating safe spaces for people to be. Because I actually believe if I create those safe spaces, people can grow. If they don't feel safe, they're not going to change. You're not going to change. I'm not going to change. No one's going to change if we're not in a safe space. So for me, a lot of my role was about being very aware of who I am and what I bring, and making sure I am very clear about who I am and what's going on and how I'm acting, how I'm living, all those things, so that I can actually help people to be safe. And again, finding safe spaces for people to meet, whether it's coffee shops or down the park or going for a walk or, simply on the phone, because that's where they feel safe, is on the phone. And taking the time to be with them, for me, is actually really important. And again, I've seen it happen where, we can create those safe spaces for people in the lives of our congregations. And I don't mean to be rude, but I used to have a list of congregations I would work with and a list of congregations I wouldn't, simply because I knew the people that I would work with, and I'd take them to a congregation, and if they felt safe there, guess what? They'd blossom and they'd grow. So there was no...
So when you say you had a list of congregations, you mean when you're in mental health chaplaincy,
yes,
there were some congregations that you would actually take these people along to
Oh, yes.
And there were others where you just went, you know what? They're arguing over who's got the keys to the cup drawer, and they're not interested in the gospel and transformation.
Or
So
they're making lots of judgments, or they're making lots of criticism, or they're kind of standing back from instead of engaging with, or they're not willing to kind of stand in that place where people are asking some really big questions about faith and life, and they're, instead of, kind of saying, well, I'm not quite sure about this, but let's work this through, they'll go, oh, no, 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 and they'll put out a pat answer or whatever it is. So for me, I found there were quite a few churches I could take people to because they would feel safe.
So in terms of these safe spaces, is that around vulnerability or willingness for people to be vulnerable? And was it around the willingness to be accepting and actually living out these factors that you've spoken about so far in terms of seeing the potential in people?
So for me, it was about people being able to be accepting.
Yep.
And for people to realize that, we all belong. We're all one in Christ. And that people, in a couple of congregations, I found people wouldn't be labelled, and their mental illness would not always be talked about. They would find other things to talk about so the person could engage in a different way instead of having to defend themselves or talk about their illness, or even things like when people would ask, how are you doing today? And the person would say, actually, I'm doing well today. In some places I would go to, they wouldn't believe them. And they'd say, how really? Are you well? So those kinds of things are really important. But I think we have the potential to create really safe spaces. And those safe spaces actually help people to heal and to grow and to be transformed.
Yes.
And again, that's a powerful, that's a powerful thing we have to offer as people of faith to our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. If we create safe spaces, if we create places where people can deal with some of their issues, but be absolutely accepted wholeheartely and embraced, then transformation is possible within those places.
I think so. I truly believe. And I've seen it happen, many times with people. And again, part of my ultimate aim with a lot of people is get them to the point where they no longer need me anymore. And I reckon if we create those safe spaces, we get to a point where people don't kind of need us anymore, but they're very much a part of what's going on and what's happening around the place. And, they're again involved in their own transformation and helping others to be transformed. So again, all that for me is really important.
Yeah.
But again, it comes down to me, and am I willing to be vulnerable, accepting, valuing? Do people belong? Have I got some baggage today that I need to deal with? And I've had situations in the past where, someone said something to me and I got a bit ticked off, and I've walked in and went to say hello to someone and they said, you're really angry with me. And I thought, oh, here comes my baggage. I didn't deal with that. So I stopped being a safe space. So for me, those things are really important.
Yeah. And all of that leads into this point. And when you talked about this, when we had our coaching session and we explored some of this stuff that you reflected on, this was one of the things that really stood out to me, because I think you've expressed it so well, and that is not being frightened of people.
I don't think we need to be frightened of people. Again, I think people are doing the best they can with what they know. And I think, the biggest issue for me is I actually expect people to get frightened. There are things in their lives that happen. There's stresses, there's illness, there's other things happening in their lives. And so they will actually themselves feel frightened. And they may respond or armor up in certain ways. That's going to happen. I expect that.
Things don't always go according to plan, right?
Yeah. So, life happens. But that doesn't mean I have to respond in the same way. I don't have to actually respond back in fear or trepidation. I know I need to keep myself safe, and I'm not saying you shouldn't keep yourself safe. I know I need to keep myself safe, but I'm not wanting to respond back in fear or what I call armoring up, because I get all tense and worried about, my own stuff that's going on or what's happening with that person. I much prefer to be in a place where I realize that this is normal and I can actually be who I'm created to be in that space without getting worried or armored up. And so for me, again, that's another way of creating safe space for people, because they know I'm going to respond out of who I am. And again, that creates a space where someone can come and say, I'm having a crap day today, or things aren't going well, Mark, or I'm ticked off, or whatever it is, but I don't necessarily have to respond in a way that is not loving, caring, all those things for people. So I think it's normal that people get frightened or upset, all those things, but I don't have to respond in that way.
And I think it's also reflective of the fact that you're embracing the whole kind of aspects of life. You're not just oh, we only talk about the good here, or it's only the happy side of life that we actually deal with.
Yeah.
So I think that there's that element. The other element within this that I think you're expressing is that that's other people's stuff to deal with, and you can help them deal with it, but it's not a reflection of you.
No, it doesn't have to affect me. They can say all kinds of things about, and I've had people say all kinds of things, by the way, but it doesn't mean I have to take it personally. And I don't have to be affronted by it. It means I can be in that space and respond instead of react. And I'd much prefer to respond instead of react.
And if you're responding, then people know that it's a safe space, right?
That's right.
It's not really a safe space if you're going to react. Like if it's like all stuff's going to come back to them, because it ricochets, get magnified from you and bounces back to them. It's a safe space if you're not going to kind of react.
That's right. So again, it does create a space where people can then talk about some of the bigger stuff that's going on for them, and also knowing that I'm not going to make judgments about what's going on for them, or criticize them, or condemn them, or think they're useless or hopeless, those kind of things that we do. And I know I don't always get it right. There are days when I walk away from having had a situation with someone and I think, oh, I didn't do so well there today. But I'm not going to beat myself up over it. I'm just going to simply learn from it and say, this is what I've learned, and this is what I'm going to do next time. And sometimes that means I go back and apologize to the person and say, I don't think I've done so well for you today. But it also means I can be in a space where I can continue to develop a relationship with that person. And again, that relationship stuff's really key for me.
And then, so it's really interesting that you say that you go back to people and apologize. What does that do for the relationship when you go back to people and actually apologize for your behavior?
Oh, often people are quite stunned, and they say, "Oh, okay," and often they're more willing then to engage in conversation with me, because they realize it's about relationship here, not about me being the professional person or the person having all the answers, but it's about us being in a relationship and working that through. And part of being in a relationship is being able to say sorry when you stuff it up. So for me, that's really important. Again, that's part of my practice that I do for people.
Yeah. So the next thing that you talk about is understanding conflict is normal.
Oh, look, I think, and again, I think conflict's a normal part of our reality, because you take one person that's come from one life situation and another person that's come from another life situation, a different experience, different way of thinking, a different way of being.
And different values.
Different values.
All the same values, but they place them in different orders.
Yeah. So, I think there is always conflict. Yeah. But I actually think conflict can actually be a good thing. Because conflict, if it's worked through, and I'm not sure we've been so good at doing that within the life of the church, but I think conflict, if it's worked through, is actually life-giving, because we can come up with a new idea or a new value or a new way of being that we just hadn't seen before. And I think when we're open to it, we're actually allowing space for God to be, and God's presence to be, and God's love to be. So I think conflict is quite normal. I think we need space to work our way through it. I think we need to be able to give ourselves time to be able to work through it instead of just a quick fix. But I think that's all part of what life is about. And again, I've met lots of people who come with very different views about what life is like. And so, and I'll hear their story and I think, oh, that's not what I think.
Yeah.
But for me, it's being able to work it through to the point that we can actually have a new picture, a new idea together. And again, I think about, for a lot of people I've worked with, they come to me with a view that I'm no good, or I don't matter, or, they don't care, or, the whole kind of pictures they can have. And so for me, it's often helping to be in that place where I can actually help them to work that through and be there with them. So again, I think conflict's quite normal, and I think we should embrace it.
Well, the other thing too about conflict, I think, is that when we start working with each other, like in taking the principles that you've talked about, everybody is better. We're better together rather than separate. We grow more when we are receiving help from others and so forth. When we start actually working on a project, or we're working together on something, at the very beginning, particularly if you don't know each other, you haven't worked together with each other before, everybody's bringing this whole gamut of assumptions, right?
Yeah.
But until there's a little bit of conflict, you're not really sure about where you sit in relationships and what people are really thinking. But it's when the conflict comes out that you can actually move to another level. Did you want to say something about that?
Oh, I think we can move to a deeper level.
Yeah.
When we don't deal with conflict, we remain superficial and away from one another. When we deal with conflict, we can actually come down to a deeper level of relationship, and we can build trust, and we can build honesty, and we can build a pattern that actually helps us to be able to work through issues so that we build relationships that will last. But when we do conflict and it's just superficial and judgmental and critical and you're them and I'm us, and it's just superficial, and it just continues to create more conflict.
Yeah, well, it doesn't resolve the issues.
No. So for me,
just perpetuate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I realize for a lot of people that I've worked with, been with, again, they've come from very different spaces. And I need to realize that that's where they've come from. And I can't make judgments because that's their experience. That's their life. That's the way they've been brought up, raised, whatever. So I need to be able to work with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's another, I'm not sure if you've heard or read about this, this research that they've done recently, but what they've done is they've done MRI scans on people's brains as they've given them external stimulus. So everybody receives the same external stimulus. The fascinating thing that they've discovered is that different people have different parts of their brain light up. So if they're shown an elephant, it'll light up a different part of their brain. Now, what that means is the neurological pathways and the thought processes that people have are completely different. They are absolutely individualized based on your genetics and also your experiences. So to judge people is to assume that your neurological pathways are the right ones and theirs are the
I've got it all. I know how to do it all. Thanks very much. Yeah, I've got the right answer.
Yeah. And you're actually missing the point.
Yeah.
And the point is that we're all created differently, uniquely, and we are individuals. And the science is actually saying that we are actually unique. And the last thing that you raise in this idea of helping others realize their potential,
Yeah.
is working alongside people knowing that it may cost you.
Oh yes. I I I don't know that we can do relationship or build relationship or see potential in people or without it costing us something. So it may cost us time or energy or money. It may, cost us time of working through a challenge or an issue with them. It will cost us. And again, for me, I know in the work that I did, I used to think about what will this cost me to do this with this person? Because I wanted to be aware of that. I didn't want to go in and just get involved and then suddenly find, oh, this is too much, and so I'll back away. Because that says something to the person that, well, actually, you're not worth it. And I'm not going to I'm not going to do this. So I much prefer to work on the idea that it will cost me something, and that's a good thing because it invests my time and my energy and all those things. But it helps me to ask the question about how much time do I have? How much energy do I have? And can I do this in a way that actually helps the person too? So I want to be able to make sure that I am helping that person in the best way that I can with what I've got, the skills, the energy. And it means that sometimes I realize I don't have it, so I need to refer on.
Yeah. Well,
or that I need to get them to see someone else because there's a different relationship that they can have with that person that I can't have. And I'm quite happy for that to happen. But I need to work out those kinds of things first and be quite clear about what's going to happen. Otherwise, I'm giving that person a message that I'll go down the road and then suddenly something happens and I'm out of there. That is not a good message to give anyone, I don't think.
And particularly people who have gone through trauma or
yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, it is going to cost. And I realize, after 25 years of working in mental health service, there are some costs I've bared and that I still bear today in some response because of, having to work in that area. But again, I've kind of worked through that and realized that it's actually, that I'll be okay. But again, that it will cost me something to do that. And again, for me, that's part of what the gospel is all about. Me being able to share my life and my faith and my gifts with a person in a way that helps them to find life. So for me, I want to count the cost.
So that was going to be my question. Is it worth it?
Oh, it's lovely. For me, there is nothing more fulfilling when you see someone. In mental health, we used to have it. So I do a lot of work with a lot of people. And each year they were been out of hospital, we would celebrate that they were we'd go out to a meal somewhere and, I'd pay for the meal and we'd do a bang up thing, but we would celebrate that they'd been out of hospital for a year or whatever it was. So for me, it's always worth it to see it when someone actually gets to the point of saying, I'm living life, I'm doing well, Mark. There are still some problems here and I'm aware of those, but ultimately I've got something to give and I'm going to give it. So for me, yes, it's worth it. I just love it when someone just gets it and goes with it. Yeah.
So you love being part of the work of transformation?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yes. You can't. I find it hard to express it, but it is just amazing.
Yeah.
When you see someone who's gone from saying I'm nothing, I'm a worm, to actually there's something good in me and I'm going to live that goodness. So yeah, it's just amazing. It blows me away every time. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for those insights and thanks for sharing those with us. So I suppose the challenge now for all of us who know these things is to actually share them with others so that it's not just about our practice, but we're actually encouraging and teaching others to develop this within their practice as well.
Oh, again, I think as Christian people, we have a beautiful gift. And that's to see the potential in others that they don't see in themselves. So I think it's a fantastic thing. Yeah.
Fantastic, Mark. Well, thank you very much for your insights. Thanks for sharing those with us, and blessings to you in your
Thank you.
ministry as you continue.
Thanks for the opportunity.